Hey, let's jump into the first story. I think we'll talk about boot camps to start off with because there's not a lot of video for this. It's more of a written product. But this was analysis done by academics, I think, out of Victoria University. Victoria University academics Simon Davies, Clare-Ann Fortune, Karen Salmon. Oh, that word's gone. The fish is a salmon. There you go. Got it. I had to say fish first. And Linda Fatialofa have written this, have put together this piece of research, and it says thus. Boot camps for young offenders are back, but researchers, people I just mentioned, say the psychological evidence that they're ineffective never went away. Boot camps for young people who commit serious offending are coming back. The coalition government has promised to pilot military-style academies by the middle of this year, despite a wealth of international and New Zealand evidence that boot camps do not reduce offending. And that link went to this piece of evidence. Effectiveness of 12 types of interventions in reducing juvenile offending and antisocial behaviour. Part of the summary of this says this: based on the most recent systematic research in each category, the most effective interventions are parent training, focused deterrence, child skills training, cognitive behavioural therapy, mentoring and family therapy. Anti-bullying programs, anti-cyberbullying programs and pre-court diversion programs are quite effective, while school exclusion, getting expelled, reduction after-school programs and boot camps are the least effective. The story goes on to say it's been encouraging to see this evidence receive extensive media coverage and expert analysis. Less encouraging, however, has been the Minister for Children's reported rejection of expert advice that the boot camp model is flawed and ineffective. I have a very short clip here of TVNZ Breakfast Show talking about the effectiveness of boot camps or not. I think this piece is about 60 seconds. Let's have a listen.
Morena, I don't have much hope at all, to be honest, and I'm appalled that this idea has come back around again after generations of failed attempts. It really is reheating something that has never had any success and really causes long-term harm.
What are your fears? What happens in those boot camps for people who don't know and think, well, they're just going to, have a bit of tough talk and a bit of tough love? What actually occurs inside those boot camps?
What we know from the evidence presented to the Royal Commission of Inquiry into Abuse and Care, from Borstall's and corrective trainings in the 70s and 80s, whakapakiri in the 90s and 2000s, and Moerangi Treks, places like that, they become really abusive because there are people there who aren't equipped to deal with young people who have complex needs. And so it might start out with good intentions, but often there's a lot of physical and verbal abuse. There's a lot of hierarchy involved because military involves hierarchy. Even if you're not really part of the military, if you're just playing at it, you still use these hierarchies. And what happens is that the older kids become enforcers and perpetrate abuse on the smaller and younger ones at the camps, and they become dumping grounds for all sorts of kids.
So there's a snippet of the information that those researchers were also citing. I'll just read, there's a couple of more sentences, George. I'll just finish this thing off and then we can get to chatting. The article goes on to say, in practice and in the criminal justice system in particular, punishment rarely works that way. It has long been argued that punishment which is immediately certain and severe will deter crime, but most offending goes undetected initially. Punishment is often delayed and more severe sentences have not been shown to deter offending. Serious offending in particular appears not to be deterred by punishment. Later on in the article, there's a section about when punishment meets trauma. Perhaps the main problem with the assumption that young people who offend seriously just need some discipline is that they have often already experienced more and more severe discipline than most. We might also call this abuse. Recent New Zealand evidence found 95% of a sample of 63 young people involved in ram raid events had been exposed to family harm. 65% reported 5 or more such occasions. And then, as every good piece should do, focus on what we know works, what to do. There is good evidence that several different interventions, ones that have therapeutic focus, involve relevant support people and work on building skills for living pro-socially, can reduce reoffending and other antisocial behaviour. Nor does it mean young people who seriously offend should be exempt from consequences, but we should be honest about the purpose and likely outcome of those consequences and accept that punishment alone will not change behaviour. They haven't worked in the past, or the experts say they're not going to work, George, and yet this government seems to want to do it again. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I guess from the government's point of view, or from the political point of view, it seems to roll back around at a time when obviously there is, especially under a national government or just coming out of an election year, especially with ram raids, gangs and regulation around gang patches and all of that. And also, here in Dunedin, the stabbing in the bus hub.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Which was a big thing for Dunedin. There's violence throughout the country. This has popped up again as a solution. I liked what the woman there mentioned about hierarchies. These things I imagine would function much like some of the gangs that people would fall into. In terms of these contexts where she mentioned the word enforcer, where there are people,
The
older kids that have to play the role of enforcing, the party line, as it were. But yeah, obviously, boot camps in general and full on punishment like that does not reduce reoffending, as the article which I had read. Actually, I would recommend people read it. It was on The Conversation, which is a great free resource with lots of academics writing there. But yes, does not reduce reoffending. In fact, could increase it.
Rua says, makes good headlines but crap policy. We got a chance to talk to Chester Burrows. In fact, you might have been on that show, George, because I remember we've seen you a couple of times when you popped up in replays, and he basically said to us the whole, this is just before he passed away, the whole idea about banning gang patches is good copy but bad policy. And actually didn't read it out this time, but there's a part of the actual article that says boot camps do not appear to be going away. They are seemingly popular with the public and will therefore likely remain popular with politicians. But the evidence is clear in the different forms tried to date, they do not reduce reoffending. So again, makes for a good headline, makes for a good bumper sticker, makes for the appearance of being tough on crime, but it's one of these things that we always say, don't we want to do things that are going to give us, Mr. Luxon, the word you love, the best outcome? And evidence the world over says boot camps don't do that. So they must literally, okay, let's be generous. They must literally just be deluded. That's being generous. In other words, saying they're not just lying for votes, but they must either be deluded and think for some reason this will work this time and it's never worked before, or the other side of that is they're literally only doing it because it gets good copy, good headlines, and gives them the appearance of being tough on crime, even though it doesn't work, which would be really sad if that was the case, but politics these days.
As the article suggests, it appeals to, a common sense approach, which, when someone says, and this is what the article is saying as well, when someone says, or it's suggesting anyway, when someone says common sense, it's a common sense approach, discipline, blah, blah, blah. Always, that should always trigger alarm bells for us. That common sense is a sort of something that is ideologically constructed. We have decided that is common sense, right? It's not something that is articulated scientifically or anything like that. We have decided as a society this is common sense, and a disciplinary approach is one of those things. So we think, okay, yeah, maybe these people do need a bit of discipline, and obviously, the team building aspect of this, and having some sort of purpose. I was talking about routine with myself before. These are all good things, but a military style boot camp as punishment is not the solution. And as you say, it's an idea from the Dark Ages, right? These aren't new. They're a better world is possible sort of ideas. These are old ideas that someone like National brings out time and time again, as you say, to create headlines and push a narrative.
It's funny, actually, when you said as a punishment, I was thinking, yeah, because you're going to punish these young people by getting them to play pretend soldiers. It's like there is, obviously, the military can sort some people out. But I guess when you hear those stories of a kid with a hard upbringing that went into the army and straightened themselves, typically they have agency in that. They're like, yes, I'll go. Whereas this is basically, you're being thrown into a prison cell, but you're being thrown into a situation where you have to do it. Maybe that's part of the reason that we don't see the success rate, because if the participant has no agency in what they're going to do, then why would they make it work? We all have to come to a point in our lives, whether it's, a young person who's as a reoffender, or a person who needs to lose weight, or a person who has addiction or whatever. We have to come to a point where we're actually really and willing to step into the next phase. And just being thrown into an area with, whatever the equivalent of a sergeant major is these days, who aren't trained to look after children, likely with mental health issues and with behavioural issues, and thinking they can just squash them and have them come out better people. It's just, when you say it like that, it's just logic that says it's not going to work, let alone anything else.
Yeah. A few people in the chat mentioned the limited volunteer service, or limited service volunteer, or whatever that program was. I remember when I was on the dole, them, trying to sign people up to that. And I guess there is definitely a place for this sort of thing. Boy Scouts is obviously another institution that has historically this function in society of discipline, of keeping the boys in line and all these kind of things. But I think, over the years we've obviously learned, as the conversation piece that you've shown articulates, is we've learned that that's not the sole solution, that there's a whole other set of therapeutics solutions that they put forth that obviously have had better outcomes.
Yeah, I mean, I can go back and find what they were, but can you imagine in a boot camp scenario them using those therapeutic focus, supporting people, working on skills for living pro-socially? That doesn't. I'm thinking more Full Metal Jacket boot camp. I know it's not going to be as serious as that, but
no.
Doesn't sound like the place that they're going to get that kind of that. So it's been told that works, but we're going to do something completely different, and we're going to try and convince you that it's going to be different.